As the church year winds down, our scriptures increasingly focus on what has traditionally been referred to as the last four things: death, judgment, heaven, and hell. We can see this clearly today as we celebrate the Solemnity of All Saints, and tomorrow when we'll celebrate the commemoration of all the faithful departed, or All Souls Day. We have our book of remembrance at the altar where we can write the names of departed loved ones who will be remembered in prayer in a special way throughout the month of November. Today, I would like to focus on the first of these last four things: death. Death is a journey from certainty into the world of faith. Death is a part of life. That knowledge should not overwhelm us, but also it should not be ignored. Research suggests that people who spend at least some time contemplating their mortality can be happier and even more successful. This is what Eric Barker found. Many of us spend our lives thinking about what Baker calls our resume values, our skills and credentials. What looks good on a resume? But when we contemplate our mortality, we tend to think of eulogy values, who we are as people, and how we wish to be remembered. These values may be much better guides on how to flourish and be the best versions of ourselves. Death is a certainty. We can see it with our own eyes. But to understand what happens after death, we must see with the eyes of faith. And that's not always easy. Bertrand Russell was a British philosopher and a very outspoken atheist. A reporter once asked him, "What if you're wrong about God and you meet God in the next life? What would you say to God?" Russell's response was to blame God for his disbelief. He told the reporter, "God, you gave us insufficient evidence." Maybe. Or maybe Bertrand Russell was looking for God in all the wrong ways, in all the wrong places. Or maybe Bertrand Russell was just a little ahead of his time. Father Robert Spitzer has reported on a number of recent, well-documented, in the medical journals, near-death experiences that peel back the curtain of what may be happening as we transition from life to death. Now, there are very rigorous standards for near-death experiences. No EEG, no heart activity. In every way we can determine the patient is dead. But these patients were resurrected. Now, in one of the patients that was reported in the medical journals with no vital signs, reported leaving her body and floating above her bed as the medical team worked on her. Now, this patient was obsessive compulsive, and as she floated above the room, she noticed the serial number on a tall 7-foot cabinet in her room. Of course, being obsessive compulsive, she memorized the serial number. And after she was resuscitated, she repeated it back perfectly to the medical staff in her room, much to their amazement. Another patient, again with no vital signs, floated above the hospital, and noticed a tennis shoe not visible from the ground on a third-story ledge. After resuscitation, a workman sent out on the ledge found that shoe just as she had described it. Another patient described verbatim her brother-in-law's conversation in the waiting room down the hall from where she was currently flatlined. Kind of reminds me I need to watch what I say. Patients blind from birth accurately reported visual data about their experiences during clinical death. The list goes on and on. Currently, the number of documented, verified, medical journal reported near-death experiences is in the thousands. It's clear from this recent research how much we don't know about something that all of us will eventually experience. But it's also clear that what we are learning is consistent with our belief in an immortal soul. And that's an important spiritual bouquet. But it is far from the evidence necessary to, quote, prove the existence of God. And I think that's as it should be. There's a world of difference between "will you marry me" and "you will marry me." One statement reflects love, a free, total, faithful, fruitful self-gift. And the other, an act of coercion. God is love and invites us to freely accept his invitation to enter into a communion of love, a heavenly marriage, so to speak. To be love, it must be a freely made commitment. We have to have the ability to accept or decline the invitation. If the evidence, the case for God were so overwhelming that we were compelled to accept it, it would no longer be love. It would no longer be an invitation to enter into a communion of love. And God would no longer be love. Death is a certainty. We can see it with our own eyes. To see beyond death, to see into the uncertainty, we need to see with the eyes of faith. That same faith that makes it possible for us to freely respond to God's invitation to enter into a communion of love. No uncertainty, no need for faith. No need for faith, no free choice. No free choice, no love. No love, no God. It's as simple and as profound as that. What Bertrand Russell didn't seem to understand is that God is not a proposition to be proved, but a relationship to be embraced. But what about doubts? What about doubts? Blessed John Henry Newman wrote, 10,000 difficulties do not make one doubt. What's the difference? A person with a difficulty says, how can this be so? Just like Mary at the Annunciation. A person with a doubt says, that can't be so. We may experience difficulties. I know I do. And they're given to us for a reason. First, to strengthen us, so we understand our faith better. Second, to clarify our beliefs. As we go through those difficulties, we become clearer in terms of what our faith is and what it means to us. And finally, we're given difficulties to help us proclaim the gospel with compassion to others. Difficulties are not a roadblock. They're an invitation to move more intimately into a relationship with God. And we're not alone in our difficulties. And that brings me to today's celebration, the Solemnity of All Saints. There's a thin veil between this world and the world we'll enter when we die. We hear in the funeral liturgy, "Indeed, for your faithful Lord, life is changed, not ended." The saints are there for us in our difficulties, both in the consolation we receive in reading about the lives of the saints and the prayers answered through their intercession. And the saints are with us in our celebrations. In the baptismal rite, we have the Litany of the Saints, an invitation for all the saints in heaven to welcome that newly baptized into the faith. And at Mass, we may hear the priest say, "With the angels and archangels, with the great multitude of the saints, we sing the hymn of your praise is without end we acclaim, Holy, holy, holy Lord." In the sacraments, especially at Mass, that veil between this world and the next is lifted, and we're united with all the saints in heaven. But the saints are also still with us, tangibly, in relics. Relics are a recognition of the integrity of the human person, body and soul. There's a long history of both veneration and the power of relics in our church. It goes back even to the Old Testament. The Israelites took Joseph's bones when they departed Egypt, and the bones of Elisha came in contact with a dead person who was then raised to life. Elisha took Elijah's mantle and fashioned a miracle from it. In the New Testament, we hear a woman who was healed by touching the cloak of Jesus. And Christians in Ephesus, using handkerchiefs and cloths touched by St. Paul's skin to heal the sick. We have been using relics for a long time. The first post-biblical account of the veneration of relics goes back to the year 155, to the martyrdom of St. Polycarp. It continued throughout the church. In the 4th and 5th centuries, the church fathers recommended reverence to sacred relics. And by the 1100s, relics were being venerated in churches and shrines. It's a practice that continues to this day and has resulted in countless blessings and miracles. We have relics at the table here that you're invited to come venerate after Mass. As our church here winds down, it's my suggestion to spend some time with the four last things: death, judgment, heaven, hell. But don't do it alone. Find a saint, or maybe a bunch of saints, to join you. In the company of these saints, embrace any difficulties you may be having with your faith. Pray for those who've gone before you and now rest in the sleep of peace. And most of all, find some time and just allow yourself to be loved by God.